The dust cloud rose behind the stagecoach as it rattled into Genoa, Nevada, carrying a woman who had spent 10 years trying to forget the boy she had loved with all her young heart. Delilah Rose pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the small mountain town materialize through the haze of late summer 1878. The Sierra Nevada peaks loomed in the distance, their shadows stretching across the valley like dark fingers reaching for something lost. She had not wanted to return. Every mile of the journey from San Francisco had felt like traveling backward through time, peeling away the layers of the person she had worked so hard to become. But her aunt had died, leaving Delilah the modest boarding house on the edge of town, and duty called louder than her fear of memories. The stage lurched to a stop outside the Wells Fargo office, and Delilah gathered her carpetbag and small trunk. At 26, she had learned to travel light to keep her possessions few and her attachments fewer. The driver helped her down, his weathered face kind beneath his dusty hat. "Welcome to Genoa, miss. You got folks meeting you." "No," Delilah said, smoothing her traveling dress. "I can manage." She had always managed. It was what she did best. The town had grown since she had left at 16. New buildings lined the main street, their false fronts painted in optimistic colors that seemed to dare the harsh mountain winters to fade them. The old general store remained, though it bore a different name now. The saloon had expanded. But the mountains, those ancient sentinels, stood exactly as they had when she was a girl running wild through the sagebrush with dirt on her knees and hope in her heart. And Owen Xavier. She pushed the thought away as she always did, burying it beneath practicality and forward motion. He would be long gone. Cowboys never stayed put. They drifted like tumbleweeds, chasing work and wages and whatever called to that restless part of their souls. He had probably forgotten her the moment her family's wagon had rolled out of town, heading for the promise of a better life in California that had never quite materialized. The boarding house sat 3 streets back from the main thoroughfare, a 2-story wooden structure with a wraparound porch that had seen better days. Delilah stood before it, keys in hand, and felt the weight of inheritance settle on her shoulders. Her aunt had never married, had spent 40 years running this place alone, and Delilah understood that choice better than most people would. The interior smelled of old wood and lavender sachets. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through lace curtains. 6 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen and dining room, a small parlor, all empty now. All hers. She spent the first 3 days cleaning, airing out rooms, taking inventory of linens and dishes and the 100 small things required to run a boarding house. She scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, beat rugs until dust clouds made her cough, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. It was exactly what she needed. On the 4th day, she opened for business, placing a small advertisement in the window of the general store. By evening, she had 2 boarders, an elderly prospector named Samuel who paid monthly and kept to himself, and a young schoolteacher named Miss Phillips who had just arrived from Ohio and spoke with breathless enthusiasm about educating frontier children. On the 5th day, Owen Xavier walked through her front door. Delilah was in the kitchen, elbow deep in bread dough, when she heard the knock. She wiped her hands on her apron and pushed a loose strand of dark hair from her face, calling out that she was coming. The screen door showed only a silhouette, broad-shouldered and tall, backlit by the late afternoon sun. She opened the door and the world tilted. He was not a boy anymore. The Owen she had known had been 15, all gangly limbs and earnest eyes and a smile that made her believe in happy endings. This man was 30 years old, hardened by a decade of work and weather. His face had lost its softness, carved now into planes and angles that spoke of determination and disappointment both. He wore a cowboy's uniform of worn denim and a dusty shirt, a brown hat pushed back on sun-streaked hair that she remembered running her fingers through once, just once, the day before she left. But his eyes. God, his eyes were the same. That particular shade of blue that reminded her of mountain lakes in summer, clear and deep and full of things unspoken. Delilah. Her name came out rough, like he had not said it in years but had thought it every day. I heard you were back. She could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stare at this ghost made flesh standing on her porch. Owen. The word barely made it past her lips. I need a room. He said it quickly, as if afraid she would shut the door. I am working at the Walton Ranch now, but the bunkhouse is full. Someone at the general store said you had space. Of course he needed a room. Of course the universe would be this cruel and this kind all at once. I have space, she heard herself say. $5 a week includes breakfast and supper. I can pay. He pulled out a small leather pouch, counted coins into his palm with steady hands. She noticed scars on his knuckles, the calluses of hard labor. I am good for it, Delilah. I have steady work. I did not doubt it. She stepped back, holding the door open. Come in. He moved past her, bringing the scent of leather and hay and open sky. The small hallway suddenly felt impossibly small. She led him to the stairs, hyper-aware of his presence behind her, of the creak of floorboards beneath his boots, of the way her heart hammered so hard she thought he must hear it. This one is available, she said, opening the door to the room at the end of the hall. It was the largest of the vacant rooms, with a window overlooking the mountains and a bed she had just fitted with fresh linens that morning. Wash basin there, chamber pot under the bed, outhouse out back. Breakfast is at 6, supper at 7. I do not allow drinking in the rooms or guests of ill repute. Owen stepped inside, set his saddlebag on the chair and turned to face her. The late sun lit his profile, and she saw the boy and the man overlaid like a double-exposure photograph. I looked for you. The words came out raw and urgent. Delilah, I looked everywhere. I rode to Sacramento, San Francisco, Placerville, every town and camp between here and the coast. I asked after your family, after you. Nobody knew anything. It was like you had vanished. Her throat tightened. We moved around a lot. My father was chasing gold strikes that never panned out. 10 years. His voice broke slightly. 10 years I have been searching. You should not have. She gripped the door frame, needing something solid to hold. We were children, Owen. What we had, it was just childish dreams. No. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, and she found herself looking up into that face that had haunted her for a decade. No, Delilah. Do not do that. Do not make it small just because it scares you. I loved you then, and I have loved you every day since, and I will love you until they put me in the ground. That is not childish. That is the only true thing I have ever known. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. You do not know me anymore. I am not the girl I was. Then let me know who you are now. Let me learn you again. His hand reached for hers but stopped just short, hovering in the space between them. I am not asking for promises. I am just asking for a chance. I have been looking for you for 10 years, Delilah. Do not send me away now that I have finally found you. She should have said no. Should have set boundaries and kept her distance and protected the careful walls she had built around her heart. But she looked into his eyes and saw 10 years of searching, of hoping, of loving someone who was not there, and she could not do it. All right, she whispered. Stay. His hand closed around hers, warm and solid and real. And for the first time in 10 years, Delilah Rose let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some childhood dreams were worth keeping. The next morning, she woke before dawn as she always did and went downstairs to start breakfast. She had the stove going and coffee brewing when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Owen appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair damp from washing, looking uncertain in a way that made her chest ache. "Can I help?" he asked. She almost said no. Almost sent him to the dining room to wait like a proper boarder, but something in his expression stopped her. "You can slice that bread," she said, nodding to the loaf on the counter. They worked in silence, but it was not the uncomfortable silence of strangers. It was the silence of people learning each other's rhythms, the dance of movement around a small kitchen. He sliced bread with careful precision. She fried eggs and salt pork, set out butter and jam. When Miss Phillips and Samuel came down, breakfast was ready and the table was set, and Owen was sitting at what she instinctively knew would become his place. The days developed a pattern. Owen left early for the Walton Ranch, working cattle and mending fences, and doing whatever needed doing as winter approached. He returned at sunset, dusty and tired, and washed up at the pump before supper. Delilah cooked and cleaned and managed the boarding house, and tried not to notice how her day felt incomplete until she heard his boots on the porch. They did not speak of the past at first. Instead, they traded pieces of the present. He told her about the ranch, about the herd they were preparing for winter, about the new calf that had been born breech and barely survived. She told him about her aunt, about the years in San Francisco working as a seamstress, about the careful monotony she had built her life around. What they did not say hung between them like morning mist, present but insubstantial, waiting for the sun to burn it away. 2 weeks after his arrival, Owen stayed at the table after supper while Miss Phillips retired to write letters, and Samuel retreated to his room with his pipe. Delilah cleared dishes, and Owen stood to help without asking. "You do not have to do that," she said. "I know." He carried plates to the kitchen, set them in the wash basin, "But I want to." She filled the basin with hot water from the stove, added soap shavings. They fell into the rhythm again, her washing and him drying, and the quiet between them felt less like avoidance and more like comfort. "Why did you really leave?" Owen asked finally, his voice low. "Your father always said it was for better opportunities, but I never believed it." Delilah's hands stilled in the soapy water. She had known this conversation would come, but she was not ready for it, would never be ready for it. "My mother was dying," she said finally. "Consumption." "The doctors in Sacramento said the sea air in San Francisco might help, but we could not afford to live there. My father took work where he could find it, and we moved constantly. She died anyway, 2 years after we left, and by then, going back felt impossible. I would have come for you." Owen set down the dish he was drying, turned to face her. "If you had sent word, if you had given me any way to find you, I would have come." "I was 16, Owen. What could you have done? What could we have done? We could have been together." He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We could have figured it out together instead of spending 10 years apart. You make it sound easy. It would not have been easy, but it would have been worth it." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with gentleness that made her breath catch. "You were always worth it, Delilah." She turned back to the dishes because looking at him hurt too much. "What happened to your family? Your father, your sisters?" "My father died 5 years back." Heart gave out while he was shoeing a horse. "My sisters married, moved away. Sarah is in Sacramento with her husband and 3 children. Margaret is in Virginia City. They are happy, I think. They write sometimes. I am sorry about your father. He was a good man. Taught me everything I know about horses, about honor, about keeping your word." Owen picked up another dish, dried it slowly. "He asked about you until the day he died. Always wondered what happened to the Rose family. Guilt twisted in Delilah's stomach. I should have written. Should have let someone know. You were surviving. That is nothing to apologize for. Owen set down the dish, and this time when he reached for her, she let him take her hand. But you are here now. We are here now. That has to count for something. It counted for everything, and that terrified her. That night, she lay in her bed listening to the house settle and could not sleep. She thought about Owen in his room down the hall, wondered if he was sleeping or if he was lying awake thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. 10 years. He had searched for her for 10 years. The magnitude of that devotion felt incomprehensible. She had tried to forget him. In San Francisco, there had been a clerk who had courted her, a steady man with prospects. She had gone walking with him, let him buy her lemonade, considered his eventual proposal before it came. But she could not do it, could not promise herself to someone when her heart still belonged to a boy in a dusty Nevada town who probably did not remember her name, except he had remembered. Had done more than remember. Had searched. Sleep finally came near dawn, and with it, dreams of dusty roads and mountain shadows and blue eyes that had haunted her for a decade. The autumn days grew shorter and cooler. Owen had Sundays off, and the third Sunday after his arrival, he asked Delilah if she would take a walk with him. She almost said no, almost hid behind work and propriety and fear. But Miss Phillips offered to mind the house, and Samuel was off prospecting, and the afternoon was golden with that particular quality of light that only comes in mountain country in the fall. They walked toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to sagebrush and open land. The mountains rose before them, already showing snow on their highest peaks. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals invisible to earthbound eyes. I used to come out here, Owen said, after you left. I would sit and watch the road, convinced that one day I would see your father's wagon coming back, that you would have changed your mind, that you would have missed this place enough to return. Owen. His name hurt to say. I know it was foolish. But I was 15 and heartbroken, and I did not know what else to do. He stopped walking, turned to face her. I kept coming out here even after I knew you were not coming back. It became a habit, I suppose, a way to feel close to you. I thought about you, Delilah admitted, all the time. I tried not to, but I could not help it. You were in everything. The way sunlight looked on water, the smell of sage after rain, the sound of horses. Everything reminded me of you. Then why did you not write? Why did you not send word? Because I was ashamed. The words burst out before she could stop them. My father became a drunk after my mother died. We lived in boarding houses worse than the one I run now, moved every few months when he could not pay rent. I worked in factories and laundries and eventually as a seamstress, and I spent every day exhausted and every night terrified. What was I supposed to write? How was I supposed to tell you that the girl you remembered, the one who had dreams and hope, had been ground down into someone who was just trying to survive? You think that would have mattered to me? Owen's voice was rough with emotion. You think I cared about money or status or any of that? I just wanted you, Delilah. However you were, wherever you were, I just wanted to be with you. We were children, she said again weakly. We were in love. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow from when he had fallen out of the hayloft showing off for her. And I know you have spent 10 years trying to convince yourself otherwise, but I also know it is not true. Because if it were, you would not look at me the way you do, like you are seeing home for the first time in years. That is not fair, her voice broke. None of this is fair. What is not fair is losing 10 years we could have had together. What is not fair is the way you suffered alone when I would have walked through fire to help you. What is not fair is standing here right now, close enough to touch you, and not knowing if you will let yourself love me again." "I never stopped," Delilah whispered. "That is the problem. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day, and it hurt so much that I thought I would die from it. I built walls and I tried to forget, and I told myself it was childish nonsense, but none of it worked. And now you are here and those walls are crumbling and I am terrified." "Of what?" "Of losing you again. Of letting myself be happy only to have it ripped away. Of being that vulnerable again." Owen reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were rough from work, warm against her skin. "I cannot promise that life will not be hard. I cannot promise that everything will be perfect. But I can promise that I will not leave. I can promise that I will love you through whatever comes. And I can promise that I have spent 10 years searching for you, and now that I have found you, nothing short of death will take me away again." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she did not care. "I am so tired of being scared. Then let me be brave enough for both of us." He leaned down, rested his forehead against hers. "Let me love you the way you deserve, the way I have wanted to for 10 years. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes." He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of 10 years of longing. Delilah melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like coffee and hope, and kissing him felt like coming home after a long journey through dark country. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the sun had started to dip toward the mountains and the air had grown cool. "I am going to marry you," Owen said, not as a question but as a simple statement of fact. "Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but soon. I am going to marry you and build you a house and spend the rest of my life making up for the 10 years we lost. I am going to hold you to that, Cowboy." He grinned, and she saw the boy she had loved overlaid with the man he had become, and her heart felt too big for her chest. They walked back to town hand in hand, and Delilah felt lighter than she had in a decade. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Delilah's life. Owen courted her properly this time, or as properly as circumstances allowed. He helped with chores around the boarding house, fixing the loose board on the porch and replacing a broken window upstairs. He brought her wildflowers from the fields, their stems wrapped in his bandana. On Sundays, they walked or rode out into the countryside, and he showed her places he had discovered during his wandering years. A hidden meadow full of aspen trees, a creek that ran cold and clear even in late autumn, a vista point where you could see 3 states on a clear day. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about the years of searching, the false leads and dead ends, the times he had almost given up but could not quite manage it. She told him about San Francisco, about the fog and the crowds, and the loneliness of being surrounded by thousands of people, but feeling utterly alone. They talked about their childhoods, remembering the summer they had spent practically inseparable, the plans they had made with the certainty of youth that everything would work out. "I was going to be a rancher," Owen said one Sunday afternoon as they sat by the creek, her head resting on his shoulder. "I was going to save money and buy land and build a house big enough for a family. And you were going to teach school or maybe run a shop, and we were going to have a dozen children and grow old together." "A dozen," Delilah laughed. "I think I said 4 at most. You said 6. I wanted a dozen. We compromised on 8. 8 is not a compromise between 4 and 12, Owen. It is when you are 15 and terrible at mathematics." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I still want that, you know, the house, the family, all of it." "I am 26, Delilah said softly. "I do not know if I can have children, and if I can, probably not 8 of them. Then we will have however many we can, and if we cannot have any, we will build a life that is full and good anyway." I did not search for you for 10 years because I wanted a brood mare, Delilah. I searched for you because you are the other half of my soul, and I cannot be whole without you." She turned to look at him, this man who had loved her so steadfastly, and felt her last remaining wall crumble into dust. "Ask me properly," she said. "Now, right now." Owen shifted, moving to kneel in front of her on the creek bank. He took her hands in his, and his eyes were bright with emotion. "Delilah Rose, I have loved you since I was 15 years old. I have searched for you for 10 years. I have dreamed about you every night and thought about you every day. You are my first thought when I wake and my last thought before I sleep. You are written on my heart and etched into my soul. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Owen Xavier, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her up with him, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and breathless. When he set her down, he kissed her with a joy that made her feel like she was 15 again, like anything was possible, like love was the only thing that mattered. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Genoa. Miss Phillips stood as witness, along with the ranch foreman where Owen worked. Samuel gave Delilah away, his old eyes suspiciously bright. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage, but Delilah barely heard him. She was too focused on Owen, on the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever prayed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. They walked out of the church into afternoon sunshine, married at last, and the 10 years they had spent apart suddenly felt like nothing compared to all the years they would have together. Owen had been saving money, living frugally and banking every spare dollar. Combined with what Delilah had saved, they had enough to make plans. They kept the boarding house for income, but Owen negotiated with the Walton Ranch owner to buy 10 acres on the edge of the property. It was good land, with water access and mountain views, and he planned to build a house there come spring. That first winter as husband and wife was cold but content. They moved into the largest bedroom in the boarding house, and Delilah discovered that sharing space with Owen was as natural as breathing. He was neat and considerate, always helping with chores, always aware of her needs. At night, they lay tangled together beneath quilts, talking or reading or simply existing in each other's presence, and Delilah marveled at how something that had seemed impossible for so long could now feel so right. In February, when the snow lay thick and the nights were longest, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She waited to tell Owen, wanting to be certain, but also wanting to savor the secret for just a moment. When she finally told him one evening after supper, his face transformed with joy so pure it made her cry. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Happy?" He pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could feel his heart racing against her chest. "Delilah, I am beyond happy. I am grateful and terrified and so full of love I think I might burst. We are going to have a family. Just one baby to start," she teased. "Not 8. "Give me time," he said, grinning. "We are just getting started." As winter gave way to spring, Owen began building their house. He worked on it every spare moment, often by lantern light after his ranch work was done. Samuel helped, and the foreman from the Walton Ranch, and eventually several other men who had heard about the project and wanted to lend a hand. It rose slowly, a testament to hope and hard work. 2 stories with a wraparound porch and large windows to let in mountain light. Delilah watched it take shape with wonder. She had spent so long not daring to hope for permanence, for a place to call her own, that seeing the house made her realize how much she had denied herself. This was not just a building. It was a future made solid, a promise kept, a dream realized. They moved in late July, just weeks before the baby was due. The house still smelled of fresh cut wood and paint. Their furniture was sparse but sufficient, cobbled together from what they had and what Owen had built. Delilah stood in the parlor on their first night, Owen's arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her swollen belly, and felt peace settle over her like a benediction. "We made it," she whispered. "We did," Owen agreed. "We made it home." Their son was born on a hot August afternoon in 1879, attended by the doctor from Genoa and Miss Phillips, who had become Delilah's closest friend. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Delilah thought she could not do it, that the pain was too much. But Owen stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, and when the baby finally came, red-faced and screaming with healthy lungs, she forgot everything except the overwhelming love that crashed over her. "He is perfect," Owen said, his voice thick with tears as he held his son for the first time. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Owen's father, and he was indeed perfect. Dark hair like Delilah's, blue eyes like Owen's, and a disposition that was remarkably calm for an infant. Those early weeks were exhausting and wonderful, full of sleepless nights and tiny miracles. Owen was a devoted father, getting up with Thomas in the night, changing nappies without complaint, walking the floor when the baby was fussy. Delilah had never imagined she could be this happy. After so many years of hardship and loneliness, after 10 years of carrying love like a wound, she had arrived at a place of such profound contentment that sometimes she woke in the night and had to verify it was real. The boarding house continued to provide income, managed now by Miss Phillips, who had proven to have a good head for business. Owen still worked at the Walton Ranch but had begun building his own herd, buying cattle cheap and raising them on his 10 acres. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were together. When Thomas was 6 months old, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time she was not surprised. She and Owen loved each other with a passion that had only grown stronger with time, and children seemed like a natural result. Their daughter was born in early winter, an easier birth than her brother had been, and they named her Delilah Rose, carrying forward Delilah's family name. The years unfolded like a map being slowly revealed. Owen expanded their land, buying adjacent parcels as they became available. The herd grew. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms for the children that kept coming. Another son, Daniel. Twin girls, Sarah and Margaret, named for Owen's sisters. Each child was welcomed with joy, each birth celebrated, each life a testament to the love that had survived 10 years of separation. Delilah sometimes thought about those lost years, the decade they had spent apart. She mourned the time they could have had, but she also recognized that the suffering had shaped them into people capable of appreciating what they had built. Owen had learned patience and determination through his searching. She had learned resilience and strength through her struggles. Together, they had forged something stronger than what they might have had as idealistic teenagers. The boarding house eventually sold to a young couple from California, providing capital for Owen to expand his ranching operation significantly. By 1890, the Xavier Ranch was one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Owen had a reputation as an honest man and a savvy businessman, someone whose handshake was as good as a contract. Delilah found her own purpose beyond motherhood. She began teaching children in their home, just a few at first, but eventually enough that they built a small schoolhouse on their property. She loved watching young minds develop, loved sharing knowledge, loved the sense that she was contributing something meaningful to her community. Their children grew healthy and happy, raised with love and discipline in equal measure. Thomas grew into a serious young man who shared his father's gift with horses. Eleanor was bright and curious, always reading, always asking questions. Daniel was the adventurous one, forever climbing trees and exploring. The twins were opposites, Sarah quiet and thoughtful, Margaret loud and energetic. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Delilah back to the creek where he had proposed. The children stayed with Miss Phillips, now married herself to the general store owner but still Delilah's dearest friend. It was a Sunday afternoon in November, the air crisp and clear, the aspens bare but beautiful in their starkness. 10 years married, Owen said, holding her hand as they sat on the same rock where he had knelt. 20 years since I started looking for you. And 41 years since I was born, Delilah added. I am getting old, Cowboy. You are beautiful, he said firmly. More beautiful than the girl I fell in love with because you carry our life together in your face. Every laugh line, every silver hair, every mark of time just makes you more precious to me, sweet talker. But she was smiling. I mean it. He turned to face her fully. I know I said this when I found you, but I need to say it again. Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for taking the risk, for trusting me, for building this life with me. You could have sent me away that first day and you would have been justified. But you did not. You gave us a chance. And that chance became everything. I could never have sent you away, Delilah said softly. My heart would not have allowed it. I spent 10 years trying to stop loving you, and I failed completely. When you walked through my door, it was like my soul recognized its missing piece. We lost 10 years, Owen said, but we have had 12 wonderful years since, and we will have 50 more if I have anything to say about it, and every single one of them will be spent loving you. Just 50, she teased. Fine, 100. I will love you for 100 years, and then 100 more. They kissed as the sun lowered toward the mountains, two people who had loved young and lost and found each other again, who had taken the broken pieces of their pasts and built something whole and beautiful, who had turned tragedy into triumph and separation into the sweetest reunion. The years continued their steady march. Children grew and eventually left to make their own lives, though none went far. Thomas took over much of the ranch operation, allowing Owen to slow down as his body protested the hard work of decades. Eleanor married a teacher from Carson City and opened a school there, carrying forward her mother's love of education. Daniel became a deputy sheriff, protecting the community he had grown up in. Sarah married young and gave Delilah her first grandchildren, while Margaret shocked everyone by moving to San Francisco to study medicine. Owen and Delilah grew old together on their ranch beneath the Sierra Nevada mountains. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over land they had built a life on, surrounded by the evidence of their love in children and grandchildren, and a community that respected them. Owen's hair went silver, and his back bent slightly from years of hard work, but his eyes remained that same clear blue that had haunted Delilah for a decade. She grew rounder with age and comfortable living, her dark hair streaked with white, but her smile remained as bright as it had been when she was 16. They never took a day together for granted. They had learned too well the pain of separation, the agony of empty years. Every morning was greeted with gratitude, every evening ended with contentment. They argued occasionally, because passion does not fade with age, but they never went to bed angry, never let disputes fester. They had lost too much time to waste what they had on petty grievances. In the spring of 1910, Owen fell ill. It started as a cough that would not clear, then developed into something more serious. The doctor came from Genoa, then specialists from San Francisco, but the diagnosis was grim. His lungs, weakened by years of dust and hard living, were failing. There was nothing to be done. Owen faced death as he had faced life, with courage and honesty. He got his affairs in order, ensured the ranch would pass smoothly to Thomas, wrote letters to each of his children and grandchildren, and he spent every remaining moment with Delilah. "I am not ready," she told him one evening as they sat together in their room, his breathing labored, his hand weak in hers. "I am not ready to lose you again." "You will not lose me," Owen said, his voice raspy but certain. "I will be waiting for you, Delilah. On the other side, I will be waiting. And when you get there, whenever that is, I will take your hand and we will walk together into whatever comes next." 31 years, she whispered. 31 years married, and it is still not enough. I want more. "So do I, love, so do I." He squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "But we were lucky. We got a second chance. How many people can say that? We lost each other and found each other again. We built a life, raised children, grew old together. That is more than most people ever get. Promise me," Delilah said urgently. "Promise me you will be waiting." "I promise." He pulled her down, kissed her forehead with dry lips. "I searched for you for 10 years in this life. I will wait for you however long it takes in the next. You are written on my soul, Delilah Rose Xavier. Death cannot erase that." He died 2 days later, peacefully, with Delilah holding his hand and their children gathered around. His last words were her name, spoken with a smile, as if he could see something wonderful just beyond what the rest of them could perceive. Delilah mourned deeply, but not bitterly. She knew that grief was simply love with no place to go, and she had so much love for Owen Xavier that it would fill her remaining days. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by family, helping raise grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. She told them all stories about their grandfather, about the boy who had searched for his lost love for 10 years, about the man who had built an empire from nothing through hard work and honest dealing, about the husband who had loved his wife more than life itself. When she died 15 years later, aged 71, it was quietly in her sleep, with a smile on her face. The family said she looked younger in death, as if the years had fallen away. And those who prepared her body for burial swore that she was holding her hands as if clasping someone else's, as if being led somewhere by an invisible partner. They buried her next to Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath the mountains that had witnessed their love story. 2 headstones, side by side with simple inscriptions. Owen Xavier, beloved husband and father. Delilah Rose Xavier, beloved wife and mother. But those who knew them understood that the real story was not carved in stone. It was written in the lives they had touched, the family they had built, the love they had shared across decades and even death. The ranch continued through the generations, always called the Xavier Place, always remembered as the home that love had built. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set just right over the Sierra Nevadas, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand through the fields, a cowboy and his love, together at last and forever, proof that some loves are strong enough to transcend time, distance, and even death itself.